Wildman West here with another Adventures in Bearland podcast, the second in our episode of Battle of Eastern Ontario. Dave wanted uh, to take care of an area and he wanted to do it good. He wanted to do it really well, and that's what I want here on this podcast. I want everyone to subscribe. I want everyone to like, comment if you can, and share, because getting the word out there on this promotion, this independent promotion that ran for over 20, 25 years with no TV, just radio ads, posters, and newspaper ads. It's very important to get the news out there. So we want to spread the news about Dave to everybody. Anyways, let's get back to next 1969, the summer cottage schedule for Dave. And it usually was the middle of May. Sometimes it was a little earlier, April, the early 80s. He started sometimes in March doing shows, and it usually went to the end of August, but early September. But some of the years he did go right through to October, which meant for a full-time season right across 5.5 months of shows just about every night. We're talking about Eastern Ontario, though. The Rougeaus had their area of Quebec, but they also came over into Ontario, and they had Jacques Senior, of course. They had Von Hess and Von Schatz. Raymond Rougeau was a new young star on their circuit, and he was pushed heavily because he was good. And they also had the Ledukes, which was great. And we know that they traded back and forth over the early 70 years with Grand Prix wrestling out of Montreal and the Vachons, and they had Carpentier and Don Leo Jonathan, Killer Kowalski, Andre, and the Vachons, of course. And these guys were coming to Hull and the Ottawa area and the Ottawa Valley down closer to the Ontario-Quebec border, where I think the 401 turns into Highway 20 going into Montreal. And they would put shows on there along with Kasaboski, who of course they co-partnered with Kasaboski in the first few years of the 70s. And he worked with Grand Prix and All-Star, which was the Rougeaus, for quite a bit of time, up until about the demise of Grand Prix, which came about in 1974-75, all the incarnations of Grand Prix that came after the fact, after they had merged and burnt out basically Quebec. Kasaboski was ready to retire. He wasn't promoting full-time anymore. Done properly, Kasaboski gave the fans what they wanted, especially because he had TV. And he lived in the area, and he was running a regular circuit there for over 25 years. I mean, he started promoting in 1946 in Ontario, so he knew what he was doing. He had a bit of a road track record, if you will. And Kasaboski was ready to retire. He's ready to give it up. He was old. Not old, but older, and he just couldn't take the grind. His area, some of his guys had gotten old. They had dried up to a certain aspect. The Rougeaus weren't going that much further north or Grand Prix that often. So it left an area open for Dave. Dave started coming in '69, that summer cottage schedule, we call it. And he started promoting, and he would come in twice a month, once a month for sure, maybe 1.5 times a month over the summer months. So 4 or 5 or 6 shows, which developed a feud that was whatever the feud was that was hot that summer, whether it was Tony Parisi and Tony Marino versus Eric the Red and Crusher Kowalski, or whether it was Angelo Mosca and Dick the Bulldog Brower, or it was some of the guys that came along a lot after. Like here's one card from Perth in 1976 with Andre, and that was a big draw in that area. Can you imagine seeing Andre the Giant in Perth, Ontario? Population probably about 5,000, if that, in 1976. Pembroke here, Chic versus Carpentier in 1980. And these are all the Battle of Eastern Ontario. Here's New Liskeard, which is going up a little bit north of that area, but Kasaboski still promoted there. That's 1981, and that's the Bear versus 2 wrestlers, Watson Jr. versus the Chic. And then we go along to, here's one I found from Nepean, which is a suburb of Ottawa. That's 1985, and Sullivan and Lewin were on that card against Mosca and Joey War Eagle. Perth here again in 1985. Chic versus the Wildman is the main event, and they would have ran that around the whole horn. And here's closer to the end, 1987, and that's Renfrew, Ontario, which was right in the general Ottawa area. Also, Chris Colt versus Joey War Eagle, and that's not even the cage match. So he printed up thousands and thousands of posters, and that's one of the lures of Dave. You know that poster was coming. You know that show was coming to your area. He was going to promote in your town, and you were going to be able to be part of the action. I think that was part of the big deal about Dave. That was not just Eastern Ontario. That was everywhere he went. He made people part of the action. And I remember the first card I went to, I wasn't part of the action, but boy, oh boy, it was pretty interesting seeing the world famous villain, the Sheik, up close and personal, 10 feet away from you, wrestling outside, fighting outside of the ring. Just by doing circles in the area in Dave's cottage tour, summer tour, he got that rapport going with the fans. He got that, they knew what was coming, they knew it was happening, and he was there to provide a break for the fans who weren't getting wrestling anymore. And this is right across Ontario. They weren't getting regular wrestling anymore, and Dave was providing it. By repeating this process every month, going around and doing the summer circuit, he gave the fans their unequaled quality in matches, especially when all of the other guys weren't promoting there anymore. They were even showing up. They just wouldn't promote anymore. He brought talent that could draw heat, and drew the cards that made Dave even more somewhat successful, although some years he wasn't as successful as others. 74, 75, 76, 73, those years he was highly successful, right up until, unfortunately, when the Bear, Smokey, took Lynn Orser, things started cooling off then, and he hit his stride back in the early 80s, and that he was promoting day after day after day throughout the summer months. As much as Jack tried to push Dave out of Ontario in the latter years, and we've all heard about the stories, especially in the book Drawing Heat, about the heat with Jack, the OAC, and Dave. He didn't have to do that. In these territories, and back in these days, the matches just were not being presented by anyone anymore, and it was all Dave's territory to take, and Dave took it, and his ramshackle circuit or promotion, whatever you want to call it, there was nothing bad about it. It was homegrown. It was there. It was for the fans, by the fans, kind of like. And Dave brought that everywhere he went, and it was so important that he did what the fans wanted to see, and he let the fans know. And you can see these two posters behind me. They're from the 1973, I think that is, 1974, and that's earlier one, 71. And those are for the posters that were everywhere in Ontario, those throughout this time period. The guys who had come before him, they did it to themselves. They stopped promoting regular. They stopped being putting on a regular circuit, if you will. Dave took care of that. He did it day after day after day, and it paid off. It paid off. He was successful. In his own way, he was successful. And the Battle of Eastern Ontario, as you can see from these clips I showed you, that there was nothing stopping him. He was just going to hit those towns year after year after year and put on a show for the fans to be part of the action. I want to say thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing. We've got upcoming shows with George Shire. We're going to talk about some of the WWA guys that came into Dave's territory during the early 70s. We're going to talk about his iconic posters. I've got a couple on-the-road stories, and I've got some great eyewitness reports that I'm going to be reading for the fans as episodes. So stay tuned. We've got lots more coming up, here on Adventures in Bearland with Wildman Wes. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for liking and commenting. Please and thank you. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.